Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 40 of Opening Basics, the Blackmar-Diemer gambit. So this is a pretty exciting and interesting gambit. I'm going to start with a little preamble here talking about the Blackmar gambit, which was the original form of this gambit, and then we'll get on to the Blackmar-Diemer proper. So the Blackmar gambit goes like this: d4, d5, e4. And already, this also leads to the Blackmar-Diemer. Already you can see that we're in for some interesting chess here. And one of the advantages of this particular gambit is it kind of catches your opponent by surprise. After d4, d5, they're often thinking about some kind of quiet positional games, Queen's Gambit declined or Slav defense, and then you throw this move e4 at them, and they're in a whole different realm all of a sudden. Now, black can easily decline this gambit at this point. He can play with c6, go into a careless, or he can play with e6 and go into a French defense. But it does require that black knows one of those two defenses. So black has to already know how to play either the French or the careless. And also, sometimes black will just take on principle. This is the best move for black, and why not just take that pawn? And then f3 is the Blackmar gambit, and the idea here is that after black takes the pawn, you take back with the knight, and you've got really a great setup here for quick development. This bishop can come out on this diagonal, this bishop on this diagonal. There's a quick castling by the king, so you get the rook on the f-file, and then this knight hops into the game, and in 5 moves you can get 5 pieces into the attack, so it really develops very quickly. And although technically it's black is better in this position, I don't want to give people the wrong idea, so you won't see this played at the top level, but it's a pretty interesting gambit, and we'll see examples of why it works. That's the Blackmar gambit, the immediate f3. The reason they stopped playing this way, so let's just go back to the beginning to repeat this. This is d4, d5, e4, pawn takes, f3. It's right here. Instead of grabbing that pawn immediately, black can throw in the move e5. And this turns out to just be good for black. It takes a lot of the play out of the position and leaves black just much better. So there's a couple of ways that you can respond if you're ever in this position as white. You might try, well, first of all, the idea is that if you take the pawn, black is just going to trade queens and develop his knight, attacking this pawn, and you get into some kind of position like this where black is actually ahead in development. The material is back to even, but black is ahead in development instead of white, and white has this weak pawn, and white has lost castling privileges. So things have just gone wrong for white, and black is really much better. Another thing that you could try as white, if you happen to get into this, is bishop e3. And you don't want to trade queens, but then black can take this pawn. You can try and keep the queen's pawn. You can play, you've got a couple active moves here you can play. Get this bishop out with pinning that knight so as to not lose your bishop. But after bishop d7, you either have to waste a tempo retreating this bishop, or you end up losing the bishop pair. So black is also better in these lines. So the Blackmar gambit is not played anymore because of that e5 move. And let's go on to the Blackmar-Diemer. The idea with the Blackmar-Diemer is that after d4, d5, e4 takes, you don't play f3 immediately, but you throw in this move knight to c3, hitting that pawn, and then after black defends with the natural knight f6, that's the main move there, then you play f3. So it's the same gambit idea, just having thrown in these two knight moves, but it makes a huge difference, and you can see that in this line. So e5, if black were to play e5, this is no longer a good move. We'll look at other moves later. Then you take the pawn, And then black continues with the idea of taking the queens off and just trying to stay a pawn up. The knight has to move at this point. It's under attack from the pawn. And then knight to d5 is a way for you to play actively and go after this fork here. The king needs to defend that pawn, and then you can develop this bishop with tempo. That's a check, and you're exploiting. You're actually making use of this pawn before black has had a chance to recapture it. And white is doing very well in this position. So e5 no longer works. So this is the starting position of the Blackmar-Diemer gambit, and we'll look at a couple of games, 3 games actually, from this position. But before I go on to the games, I wanted to back up and look at some other ways to get to the same position. You do have to watch out for these particular transpositions, and if you're white, there's different ways for you to get to that Blackmar-Diemer gambit position, and if you're black, there's different things you can try along the way depending on how white is playing. So the main line, d4, d5, e4, is to encourage this this pawn capture right away. But sometimes white players will go with knight c3 first, so that after this, after knight f6, then play e4. In this position, actually, white has a number of other choices. White could also be going for a Richter-Veresov attack. So this is kind of a way of keeping black a little bit guessing about your intentions. But now if you play e4, and black goes with the taking, and go f3, you get to the Blackmar-Diemer. But there is one option that black has in this position, and I think for the black player this is what I would recommend. Black can actually take this pawn with the knight now because of this particular move order. And with this exchange, I think black comes out of this a little bit better. Bishop e3 is the move for white at this point. Once again, you can't play the move f3 because now e5 is effective. e5 is effective again because these 2 knights have been traded off, and so you're into something that looks a lot like the original Blackmar gambit, so you can't play this f3 move right away. So that's one way with this move order, which I have seen in my own games. That's why I wanted to bring it up. d4, d5, not going for the Blackmar-Diemer right away with e4, but throwing in knight c3 first, knight f6, and then e4. Instead of going into the Blackmar-Diemer gambit, just take that pawn with your knight if you're black, and it's should be good for black. Another way to get to that same position and is after d4, black will often play not d5 but knight f6, and then you can play knight c3 and see how black is going to respond. And the most normal move here for black is actually d5 for a couple of reasons. One is it's actually the best move if you look at this position with a chess engine or an opening book. That'll be the top choice. But well, the other reason is if you're the black player here and you're faced with an unfamiliar opening, you know, at this point you're looking forward to c4 or perhaps knight f3 and going into some kind of king's Indian or queen's Indian. So this move is outside your standard set of moves that you're expecting. So you just fall back on basic opening principles and play d5. So it's a very natural way to play. And then white can play e4 here, hoping for the Blackmar gambit. And well, once again, black has the choice. Black can go for the Blackmar-Diemer gambit, or black can take with the knight. And you know, I would really recommend for black to take with the knight, as I explained before. Let's see, is there one other wrinkle I wanted to look at? So let's look at this line, d4, d5, e4, takes, knight c3, knight f6, and right here, instead of knight f6, there is, after knight f6, f3, just to complete that thought, This is back to the Blackmar-Diemer, so another way to get to it. But right here, if white has gone for this move order of putting the e-pawn forward first and then bringing the knight out, the standard way of playing the Blackmar-Diemer, you can, instead of playing knight f6, you can actually play the move e5 right here as black. And this is also, although maybe not technically the best line for black if you put on a chess engine, this also gives some interesting play. White doesn't want to take that pawn, so bishop e3. He takes d4, bishop takes d4, and now the knight can come out to c6 with a tempo on the bishop. We get this line, something similar to what we saw with the Blackmar gambit. But well, white is better off. This is a let's see, it's knight g2. This is a position where let's see, it's still a gambit because black has this extra pawn, but it's a weak pawn that white is going to be able to round up. And there's a lot of activity for white here as well. Anyway, it's a pretty balanced position, but it also has taken away some of the sting of the Blackmar-Diemer as well. So that's just an idea in this position. If white is going for the Blackmar-Diemer with this e4 knight c3, the normal move order, instead of playing into it with knight f6, you can avoid it with e5 or get into another variation, which is playable for black. Okay. What I wanted to look at next was some games where we see the actual ideas of the Blackmar-Diemer gambit. So this game I wanted to show you was played in 1954 in Baden-Baden, and it's between Diemer and Heints. So Emil Joseph Diemer is the one who came up with this idea. And he played it a lot, so it's justly named after him. Heints I don't know anything about, but let's look at this. So it's d4, d5, e4. This is the main way to play it. Takes knight c3, knight f6, f3, and Heinz is not afraid to go into the gambit by taking on f3. There's one more way that black can decline the gambit, which is sometimes recommended: e3, bishop takes e3, and e6. But actually, white is fine in this line. This is good for white, so nothing to be afraid of. Playable for black, but white is fine there. But Heinz was up for the challenge, went for the Blackmar-Diemer gambit, and then played g6, which actually may look a little funny at first, but it's one of the main replies here. And we'll see some very logical play by both players for the next 5 or 10 moves. So watch how things develop. Bishop to g5, bishop g7, queen d2, castles, bishop c4, b6, developing the other bishop out on this diagonal, castles queenside, bishop b7, h4. Okay, well, let's back up before h4. If you look at that sequence of 4 moves, every move that Diemer played there was developing a piece. It was bishop g5, queen d2, bishop c4, and castles. Every move developed a piece, and now he's got all of his pieces out, and after bishop b7, he plays the move h4. Now, if you put this in a chess engine, the chess engine will still say that black is doing fine. And it's one of those features of the Blackmar-Diemer gambit is that it often occurs in these games that the chess engine likes black from the beginning of the gambit, and will say black is doing fine, black is doing fine, black is doing fine, and then whoops, black made a mistake and black is losing. And that's the theme of this game too. But it's also generally the idea with the Blackmar-Diemer gambit. You get your pieces out, you put that pressure on it, on your opponent, you just keep attacking, and people can't defend as accurately as a computer, so this constant pressure can get to them. So let's see, but black is no slouch here. Black is continuing to develop, and he's still doing fine at this point. Notice that he's managed to get all of his minor pieces developed. He's like a step behind because he took couple of moves to fianchetto his bishop. So h5, this attack is coming first, and black has got to defend against it. He played knight a5. This is actually a good move here, kicking this bishop off this somewhat sensitive diagonal. The bishop drops back to d3, and then he plays knight takes h5, just saying, I'm gonna accept your gambit pawns, and I'm going to play on. The bishop goes to h6. Diemer is interested in trading off this defensive piece that is near the black king. And Heints here is interested in trading off the attacking pieces. He plays bishop takes f3, which is correct. That's actually the best move there. And then right here is the mistake. He plays a very natural move, knight to c6. You know, this one piece that he had that was kind of out of play on the side of the board, he's going to bring it back into the game, and then all of a sudden he's lost. So the move he had to play here was queen takes d4, grabbing another pawn, but more importantly, helping to defend the king side. So after bishop takes, queen takes, he gets the queen over here to help defend. There's still some issues. There's this idea of sacrificing here and opening up the G file for a skewer, but black can actually defend that position, and after knight to c6, things just fall apart. And Diemer plays very accurately here. He starts with the exchange sack, take on h5. Then he plays rook g1, and he's got his rook and his bishop piled up on the pinned piece on g7. So now Heinz plays queen takes d4, but this is losing the queen. Well, a queen for a rook and a bishop, but also his king side is left exposed after this. And after queen g5 check, the king goes back to h8. White plays queen h6, and black resigns. So what's going on here? There's the threat of checkmate, and the only way to block the checkmate is to play the f-pawn forward, and that doesn't deal with the second threat. This queen h6 move is actually a double attack. It's hitting the knight over here, so even if black momentarily holds off the checkmate, white is going to be effectively two pieces up, a queen against two rooks, but white also has a bishop and a knight. Black has a bunch of pawns, but that will be a pretty straightforward win, so Heinz resigned. Okay, let's check out the next game. This game was also played in Baden-Baden in 1953. Diemer's opponent in this game was Alfred Zanley. And, well, let's go through the opening. Starts out the same way, d4, d5, e4 takes, knight c3, knight f6. And once again, Zanley is not afraid of the gambit and takes it. So, takes back. And now he plays in an interesting way. I think this is, if I had black, this is how I would probably play. First, getting the bishop outside the pawn chain. Let's see, and then bishop to c4 here, and then e6. So pretty logical sequence. Opening up this diagonal for the bishop, preparing to castle, getting this bishop outside the pawn chain, but over here on the king side where the attack is obviously on its way. So let's see how this works out. White castles, black continues to play solidly with c6, although the chess engine indicates maybe bishop e7 was best there, but let's go with the game. c6 is still good for black, and knight e5. So moving a piece twice, but before developing the bishop, but maybe he's not quite sure where to put the dark squared bishop. Anyway, e5 is a good square for the knight. This bishop drops back to g6. I guess that was one of the ideas here, is opening up that f file for his knight, and maybe even threatening some kind of exchange sack on f5 there. So the bishop drops back. Now bishop g5. So all the pieces are out. And this side is pinned. Now bishop e7, breaking the pin, and h4. So once again, we see that same pattern. Get all the pieces out, and then start pushing the pawns forward towards your opponent's king. Black hasn't even castled yet, but I don't think. But he's clearly set up to defend the king side, so he goes ahead and castles at this point, and Diemer continues with g4, and now knight to d5, setting up this interesting defensive piece here, just kind of blocking the center. It's not so easy to chase away, and we'll see how Diemer deals with this. Also, this move opens up the diagonal towards the dark squared bishop, and it's attempting to trade off one of the attacking pieces. And Diemer goes for the trade. I mean, he's also trading off one of the defending pieces, and that dark squared bishop in this pawn structure is actually a good piece. So Diemer's probably okay with this trade. Queen takes, and then he gives up his bishop for the knight. Thought this was an interesting choice here, but this bishop had no big role to play, and that knight on d5 was an annoying piece. So he gives it up, and then pushes on with his h-pawn, so forcing this bishop to find a new home. But Black has calculated all of this and has decided to play the bishop to e4. So Black takes this off. Once again, this is a piece that has to be gotten rid of. And in the long run, maybe this pawn will become weak. And then, if all else fails, if he can't win in the opening, perhaps he can, win that pawn back and have a decent end game. So let's see. After d takes e4, he follows up with queen to e2, eyeing that pawn. Now f6, kicking the knight. And f6 is a move you might question here, because it has a certain amount of logic. Let's talk about the good points first. It's blunting the rook's rook on this f file, so it's kind of a desirable move from that point of view, and it's kicking the knight. So those are the two ideas that it has. But it opens up this diagonal to the king, so in a way it's kind of asking for trouble, although not technically losing. It's just the hole that Black is digging is getting deeper. Let's see, what's playable here. Knight to d7 is maybe a more practical way to try and chase away this knight. But maybe Black is playing for a little more. Maybe he's trying to go for the win here. But anyway, f6, opening up that diagonal to the king, which Diemer jumps on immediately. Queen c4, check. The king runs to h8. And now knight to g6, check. And so this is maybe what Black was not anticipating here. I will say, I think this is still not losing for Black. It's just getting difficult to defend at this point. But this is a sacrifice of an entire piece, which Black has to play. I just think it's interesting that, when you play these moves to kick a piece away, your opponent can sometimes find a way to not move the piece back, but to move it forward. And that can be very, very annoying when that happens. Okay, so you have to take. King has no moves. And then h takes g6. And now we see that not only is the h file open, this is covered, so the king has no squares. And this pawn, of course, is a very dangerous piece in its own right, controlling squares around the king. One theory of attacking when you have these advanced pawns is that it's okay to sacrifice a piece, because a pawn near your opponent's king is worth as much as a piece. And we'll see that pawn proving its value here. And now queen d6. This may be the losing move. It looks like there was a possible defense here with the move rook to e8. And although this still looks very tricky, say rook to f2, preparing to get to the h file, and then queen to e6, blocking this diagonal and provoking, white can throw on this check first, king to g8, and then the trade. And this turns out to be, let's see, after king to g2, king to f8, rook to h8, king to e7. The idea with king g2, by the way, was to open up the back rank for that rook. Here, cancel that. Open up the back rank for this rook. Anyway, this position is rated by the chess engine as even. So black is a knight up, but maybe he's going to have a trouble getting that knight into the game. Anyway, Diemer obviously would have been okay with this position as well. He's still attacking, and I think he will continue to attack as long as he has any force at all on the board. But anyway, going back to this position, that was rook e8. That was the chess engine recommendation. What Alfred Zanley played in this point was queen d6, which is also an interesting move. I mean, it's a counterattacking move. He's going to come in here and check the king, and if that's not dealt with, then there's at least a draw that black has in this position with the perpetual check. So rook f2, that blocks things, and then queen to d5. So this was Zanley's idea. He wanted to get from this square to this square with tempo. So he came here threatening this perpetual check, and then he came to this square blocking that diagonal. But this just doesn't work out. The queen drops back to c3, looking at getting to the h-file this way. No trade was forced at this point. The queen comes over to g5. This is also Zanley's idea. If the queen comes over, now he can block with the queen. So instead of bringing the queen over, Diemer brings the rook over. Rook to h2, check. The king goes to g8. This queen has been chased off that diagonal, so that this is a safe square for the king. But now there's actually a forced mate. So if you want to, see if you can find the forced mate for white. Pretty interesting sequence of moves here. Sort of a combination of two ideas. Yeah, pause the video if you want some time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. You have to start with the move queen to b3, check. And the thing is, this forces the queen back to d5 to block. And you might ask, what kind of progress has been made by forcing the queen back away from the h-file? But now the second idea comes into play, which is the rook sacrifice. Rook to h8, check. And the king has no moves other than to take the rook. And, Zanley resigned at this point. But after king takes rook, you have a very typical mating idea. Queen to h3, check. King goes there, and then the queen comes in with the checkmate. So, anyway, a very nice combination. I like that. After king g8, I like that combination of ideas. The immediate rook g8 check and queen to h3 doesn't work because black has the queen here blocking, prepared to block the h-file. So that's why you have to throw in queen b3 check first, queen d5, then rook h8 check, and black resigned here. Okay, there's one more game I wanted to show you. This is a game that was played in the Dalles in Oregon in 1963. It was played at the Dalles Open. With the white pieces, we have Evers Dolberg, and with the black pieces, we have Glenn Buckendorf. A couple of interesting players. Evers was a FIDE master and also Oregon state champion at one time, and Buckendorf was 10-time Idaho state champion. Now, this was the first round of that tournament. I think Evers was considerably stronger than Glenn Buckendorf, and he's the one who played the Blackmar-Diemer gambit. But, Glenn puts up a good fight in this game, and it's pretty interesting. Let's see. Evers plays d4. Glenn responds d5. We get knight c3, knight f6. So he doesn't play the Blackmar move order, but he moves the knight out. And then after e4, this is the point where I'm actually recommending that black play knight takes e4, but d takes e4, accepting the Blackmar-Diemer gambit, f3, and now the move bishop f5. And I especially wanted to show this game because bishop f5, this is the way that I've been playing against the Blackmar-Diemer. I kind of discovered this. I think at this point, having researched this a bit, I would play one of those other disrupting moves rather than get to this position that I talked about earlier, because there are ways to disrupt before you get to this position, either with knight takes e5 or pawn to e5, depending on how white's move order. But this is the way I have played up to this point. And I discovered this by looking at it with the chess engine. The chess engine's top two choices were pawn takes, which just accepts the gambit. We looked at those games, and this move bishop f4, which also is a bit of a greedy move, holding onto the pawn. But like I say, it gets, as I said in the previous game, I think it gets this bishop outside the pawn chain, prepares this e6 idea to open up a diagonal for the bishop. I mean, it seems to solve a lot of black's problems. So it's interesting to see how white plays against this and keeps the initiative. So f takes e4. This is also the way that Diemer played this when he was faced with this idea. And then after knight takes, I mean, you can play bishop takes at this point, but then black is giving up the bishop pair for no particular reason. So knight takes is the main move, and queen f3. And this is also the line that Diemer played against this setup. I wanted to mention one other idea that white has here. If you're interested in playing the Blackmar-Diemer gambit, and you don't like the queen f3 line, there's also a g4 line, kicking this bishop back. Bishop g6 and g5, kicking the knight back, or kicking it anyway, and then taking the pawn with the knight. And let's see, e6 from black to continue developing, and then c3 to block checks on this diagonal. And this looks like an interesting setup for white. This looks like something that is playable. You know, if black ever trades off this bishop, this pawn comes to e4, chasing this knight away. This advanced g-pawn is somewhat cramping black's development. And I think white can continue with this plan of a king-side attack, develop the pieces, get them out, and maybe even defer castling. Because, well, things look pretty solid over here on the queen side. Maybe just start throwing pieces forward and castling queenside would be an idea from this position. Okay, but in this game, Ivar's played f takes e4. And like I mentioned, that's also the way Diemer played this position. Knight takes e4, queen f3, and then the knight went back to d6. There is an interesting wrinkle here. Knight takes c3 is possible, and also interesting for black. After knight takes c3, white has a choice of which piece to take. Maybe pawn takes knight is the best choice here, but this is a tempting move, grab the bishop. But then black has the idea of an intermediate move, e6, kicking the queen. Queen drops back, and then the knight comes to d5. So that intermediate move allows black to save the knight. He's lost the bishop pair, but he's got a good position for the knight, at least for the moment. I guess it can be chased away. Anyway, interesting play. And black is still doing okay there. But knight back to d6 is also one of the main moves in this position. This is still a book position. Bishop f4. Ivar's continues with quick development. e6. Castles queenside. c6. So black going for a very solid defensive setup. Knight to e2. The queen on f3 is in the way of the development of the knight, but the knight can come out to g3 here. Knight to d7. g4 kicking the bishop. Bishop drops back to g6. Knight to g3. And knight to f6. And so it looks like white has succeeded in getting all of his pieces out and is ready to start pushing the pawns forward some more, while black is lagging a little bit in development. This is the kind of position where, once again, the chess engine will say black is better, but you know, this is what you're going for with the Blackmar-Diemer gambit, and certainly there's a lot of activity you've got here. So h4, black responded with h5, and now bishop to h3. Bishop to h3 apparently is not best. G5, I think, keeps things in balance. And after bishop h3, it seems like black has a pretty good position here. He takes, bishop takes, knight takes, so getting rid of some of the attacking forces. Although knight to c4 was recommended here. Let's see if I can remember this idea. Knight to c4. Well, black continues with h5. Bishop drops back to h7. Now the bishop goes to h3. Has to try and save the bishop. Yeah, save the bishop pair, which knight c4 seems to have gotten. And now queen b6. Yeah, that's the idea. So going for the counterattack, looking at the b2 pawn. So that may have been the best plan for black in this position. And if white plays b3, black can actually castle queenside here. Maybe this is an idea he missed, but it's apparently too dangerous to take that pawn there. Well, there is the bishop coming out with check here. This looks pretty bad, and the other bishop is targeting this pawn. Yeah, things are looking very dangerous there. So anyway, that's good for black. Anyway, black here just took the bishop off immediately. I think should also be in the range of, well, it should be at least okay. And we get another a long series of moves where neither player is making any particular mistakes. Notice that white is keeping up the pressure, and black is trying to defend actively by going for counterplay. So knight f5, h5 kicking the bishop, taking on g3, getting rid of some more attacking pieces, and then harassing the queen. Queen goes to f4, bishop e7, getting the last piece off the back rank. King b1, getting off this diagonal. There was a big threat of this skewer here, or pin. Let's see, bishop g5 anyway, kicking the queen. The queen drops back. Now black's queen comes out, and black finally gets castled. So it seems like black should be okay here, and he has counterplay against white's queenside castled king here. So it seems like black has been doing pretty well so far. We get bishop e5 harassing the queen, which goes over to h6, blocking the h-pawn. Rook comes to g1. Now f6, defending this bishop and attacking this bishop. And the bishop drops back. We get the rook out, and the c-pawn comes forward. And yeah, black is trying to get something going on the queen side here. Pawn takes, rook here, and then rook d7 apparently was the best move here, trying to round up that pawn, and things are still about even. If black gets that pawn, let's see, he's got the bishop pair. His kingside position is still a bit awkward, but he has an extra pawn too. So anyway, interesting position here. Maybe I think the chess engine likes black in this position. Like so many cases, it likes black until it doesn't. And the mistake here is rook to d7, although pretty interesting looking move there. I mean, this pawn is stalled for the moment, so there was no big hurry to round it up, or so it seemed. And there's some pretty dangerous looking attacking ideas against white's king here. And this also is threatening to win the bishop. But, well, the queen can move with check. So queen c4 check, king goes to h7, and the king is safe over there for the moment. And now the queen goes into f7, hitting the rook. Maybe this is what he didn't expect, leaving the bishop hanging. But, of course, the queen is attacking the rook, so that's pretty safe. Instead of defending the rook immediately, Glenn plays the move rook takes c2, setting up a really nasty discovered check against the king. Ivars calmly walks the king away to a1. And now bishop to c1, going after this pawn here, and threatening, something that starts to look like checkmate. But white finds a clever defense, knight to d1. And this is the position, this is the last chance black has to get an even game. He's got enough counterattacking possibilities here against the white king to draw this game, or at least get an even position. but there's only one move, and this often happens. You defend and you defend and you defend, but you can't find. At some point, you have to find one key move to keep things going, and you can't find it, and then things fall apart. The one move that Glenn can play here that keeps the game at least even, and actually gives him some winning chances, is the move Rook takes b2. And of course, this is a pretty tricky idea to find. But if White takes that knight, White ends up losing. So if you grab here, then bishop takes with check, and there's nowhere for the king to go but here, and then queen d2 check. And this is a forced mate. It looks like the rook's covering the back rank. It looks like the king should not get mated, but if the king runs to the corner, queen to c3 mates, and if the king goes forward, then queen to b4 mates if the king goes to either of those squares. So the queen will mate the king on, depending on where the king goes, the queen will mate from either this square or this square on the next move. So kind of an amazing checkmate pattern there. So after rook takes b2, he can't take that. He can still get an even game like this with White. You play here queen g6 check, and bishop takes, naturally, and pawn takes. So he's not really sacrificing the queen because he gets it back. King drops back, rook takes, pawn takes, and now it's safe to take the rook. And the king takes the bishop, and the rook takes the pawn. So the dust has settled, and we have an endgame where White has 2 pawns and a bishop and a rook, and Black has 5 pawns and a rook, and the chess engine rates this as even, although both sides would no doubt play this out for a long time, and that would be best play for both sides. But anyway, Glenn had to find that rook takes b2 move. It's the only move in this position. He played a different move here. He played bishop to d2. I'm not quite sure what his idea was, but like I said, every other move loses, and this one loses to the move knight e3. So knight e3 is a fork. It's forking those two guys, but it's also, remember, this rook is still hanging over here. So so basically, there's just nothing that Black can do. Maybe he was thinking he would trade that knight off, but then he's still losing the rook down here. So so Black resigned at this point. And anyway, interesting game, and that wraps it up for the Blackmar-Diemer gambit. In the next video, I'm going to talk about this position, and instead of looking at e4, I'm going to look at a couple of other ideas that White has. Well, in the immediate next video, I'm going to look at the Richter-Veresov attack with bishop to g5. So I'll see you guys then.